Dubey sir, you can unmute and start.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back again. We have with us Dr. Vikas Baniwal. I want to extend a very warm welcome to Dr. Baniwal and also want to thank him for accepting our invitation and being here to talk to this group. Dr. Baniwal will be speaking on diversity and dialogue in the present times. Uh, Dr. Baniwal has been in this group earlier, but for those who are new to the group or joining for the first time, I'd introduce Dr. Baniwal to all of you. Dr. Vikas Baniwal is currently working as an assistant professor at the Department of Education in the University of Delhi. He has been a general fellow for his postdoctoral work at the Indian Council of Philosophical Research, ICPR. He completed his doctoral studies at the University of Delhi in education in 2015. Overall, he has about 12 years of teaching experience in school, higher education, research, and administration. He has many publications to his credit, and his key research interests include intersubjectivity, dialogue, inclusion, mental health, self, and identity. With these words, I want to welcome Dr. Baniwal once again and would request him to please go ahead with the discourse. Dr. Baniwal.
Thank you very much, sir. And I'm deeply humbled sitting in front of those who met Krishnamurti and, of course, who have been thinking and reading his words. So today, I thought that the discussion should be something which is both academic, but also which is very pertinent socially, personally. So after taking quite some time, I thought that we should discuss about dialogue and diversity in the present times. So I would begin with what do I mean by the present times? And I think these times are no better than the times in which Krishnamurti spoke his words. So I think the present times, the hallmark of the present times is violence. There is violence in various forms, violence towards self, towards others, social violence, systemic violence. Wars are being waged, democracy is sabotaged, systems corrupted, intolerance is rising, pluralities and diversities are demonized. And in between all this, what I find prominent is this distinction between the self and the other. Where and in all of these distinctions are being created, highlighted to assert the legitimacy of one's own demand and claim, or to establish the supremacy of one's own identity. Now, how can dialogue happen in such an ethos? With what vision should one engage with others? Are there common grounds for meeting each other? So today I thought I would discuss the tension between the way social transformation is suggested by Krishnamurti ji and other social thinkers, for example, Paulo Freire. So this topic arose because many of my students ask this of me, that sir, if we are living through Krishnamurti's words, then it requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of hope and trust in the goodness of others. Whereas if we work towards social action through the ideas of other social thinkers, then there is a meaning in the struggle. There are small wins. There are milestones to be achieved. There is a plan to be followed. There is a sense of agency and control that, yes, we are doing something for the cause. And when they ask this, I often go back to Krishnamurti and I read his diary entry, The Three Pious Egoists, in which he talks about a sannyasi and orientalist and a worker of a utopia. And he highlights that all of them want to change the other, want to convert the other into the self-same. So the movement that a sannyasi and an orientalist and a worker of a utopia have in Krishnamurti's entry is from plurality, diversity, multiplicity to sameness. And this is a very interesting movement which Krishnamurti ji was able to see in between these three people with different ideologies, different perspectives, different ways of working. But nevertheless, the question of my students is something which always makes me think that how can I, even as a beginner, to just be witness and wait for the change to happen, and why this social political action, why should we be away from it? So this is the tension that I thought I would like to discuss about today. Now, the first point, I think from where I should begin, is this idea of identity. That even if we go the social political way to bring change, there is acceptance of identities. Yes, there are values towards which we work, but there is an acceptance of value of identities. And Krishnamurti very beautifully highlights the problem with holding identities, the issue with holding ideologies. So again, going back to him, there is very interesting entry of his called Ideology in his commentaries on the living, part 1. And so he very beautifully writes here that the ideologies or dogmas of organized religions are also based on experience, perhaps of the one who has given out the teachings. Your ideology may be the outcome of study, of comparison, of accepting certain facts and denying others. And your conclusions may be the product of experience. But how can you reject the ideologies of others as being illusory when they also are the result of experience? So in every ideology, for every ideology, there are foundations. For people like Freire, it's universal, human, liberal, enlightenment values. But what Krishnamurti demands from us is negation of all foundations. And this is a very, I would say, brave thing that he demands from us. That all foundations are to be given up. Now, we do need justification. We do provide justification for our actions. So how can we give up all foundations? So the response to this is that we provide justification when we have a sense of self, that it's me who is taking an action. And the moment you define the me, we are actually not away from the social, political identities. So what Krishnamurti demands from us there is that unlike the socio-historical self of a political thinker, the self is constituted of memories. Yes, love and compassion could be at the core of both. A person like Freire, he speaks of a revolution based on love and compassion. But this revolution is based on a certain ideology, on a certain perspective. Relationships may be at the core of both, but relationships between people as human beings and between people as products of their socio-political context, that's the difference that Krishnamurti wants us to understand. So then what I tell my students is that, the demand here is not to justify an action as if you have done it in the past. It is to do it with your whole being, with your whole commitment in the present. And it is this present which is of value and which is undermined in any planned action. So there is a history of oppression and there is a future where we want to strive to, where we have an established ideal, a utopia towards which we strive. And in this struggle of the history and the future, the present is diffused. So I think this is a point where things become, how should I put it? Where action cannot be put into words. The idea that you are acting in the moment, it defies all rationalization of that action. Because that action is coming from your being, your whole self, and not as a self constituted of memories. And probably this is what Krishnamurti meant by choiceless awareness, an action which is born out of a choiceless awareness. And as an educator, this is what I struggle always. That it's a way towards which we can point as educators. But we cannot tell anyone how to go there, how to be there. That experience cannot be articulated in words. So this critical awareness that a socio-political thinker talks about is a rational awareness. Yes, its roots could be in love and compassion, but it's a rational awareness. But the kind of awareness that Krishnamurti highlights as the pure center of action, that choiceless awareness is without thought, without reason. So every ideology will ultimately try to become dominant, and it will marginalize other ideologies. So I think Krishnamurti in that sense is more critical than any critical thinker, that he denies the value that we ascribe to all ideas, perspectives, or theories. So it's a quest towards negation, not just a quest to reinterpret, rethink, critique, or promote something else. So the revolution that Krishnamurti demands or hopes for, not demands, it cannot be probably demanded, but what he hopes for that we will bring is in our internal psyche, is within ourselves. So whereas a socio-political thinker tries to change the reality outside. Yes, there is some personal commitment, there is some personal revolution involved there, but the target is outside. So there is only a shift in the way a person thinks. But at the core of Krishnamurti's revolution is a total transformation of the mind. So again, it becomes difficult for me as an educator to talk about this transformed mind, because every talk about it is a rational talk. So it cannot contain that quality of the mind, cannot communicate it. It is to be experienced. So for that revolution, all planning must cease. So this this is another point where students ask me a question that, sir, if revolution is inside, then how do we have a dialogue with others? And this is where Krishnamurti's ideas or idea of images become a way to explain it. That when we talk to other, we talk to their images that we have constructed, not to them actually. So living in the past means carrying those images. And living in the future is making images for the future intentionally, in which there is always a mediation by the images when you have a dialogue with others. So a dialogue then is being open to the unknown. And as I said earlier, that it is in the silence, it is in the pauses between the words that the unsaid is known. So yes, the socio-political sharing of lived realities is important, but that's not how true dialogue happens. And again, calling something true and untrue, making those judgments, they are all non-dialogical. So the freedom then in such a dialogue where you are engaging with the other as a whole is absolute. And this is another thing which socio-political thinkers do not believe in, that every freedom for them is within the structures. It can never be absolute. So how can we have an absolute freedom? So it's in this moment, in what I'm doing, in this action, which is not coming from a thought, from a perspective, from a push from the past. So, I tell them that when such a dialogue happens, you cannot tell that it is happening. You will only be able to point it out as a path that probably it happened then. Because when you are in it, you cannot say that it is happening. So that metacognitive ability that we highlight so much on, that metacognitive ability is not there when true dialogue is happening. So similarly, when we talk about this personal social transformation, it is in the present. And I often get stuck here because it is something which cannot be explained in words. It can be experienced. You sense it when you read Krishnamurti's words. And you sense it when you think about his choice of dissolving the order of the Star of the East. This idea that pure action will not come from institutionalization, from ideology. So it's very difficult to explain to such a person who believes in an ideology strongly that there can be an action without ideology. Because the immediate response is that this is another ideology. And that is when you have to highlight that no, it's not an ideology, it's an action which may be it may be refined by reading Krishnamurti, but it's not following Krishnamurti. Because if you follow Krishnamurti, then yes, it's an ideology. So this struggle between agreeing with him and still not following him, and sometimes disagreeing with him but being open to him, and finding legitimacy and probably sometimes even rationally justifying your choices, but trying not to justify and be in the moment. I think these are the tensions that I and my students as young practitioners of dialogue face. So I think I'll take a pause here to take your questions, and probably then I will build again.
Yes, I think Harshad Bhai wants to say something. Yes, please unmute yourself.
Yes. Are you able to hear?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Vikas. Krishnaji says that if you want to go very far, you have to start from near, and the nearest is your own self. So if we want to change society, it's not possible without changing ourselves. What does it mean to change ourselves? It means to understand ourselves very, very clearly and can see clearly how thoughts and feelings are coming and creating problems. And to have a dialogue with somebody, it is possible only when there is a freedom to speak, freedom to listen, and not interfere. Like what I have seen the dialogues taking place, where people don't have the freedom and they are having a dialogue, and then they are shouting and not listening to each other, and they have certain fixed views and do not have the ability to understand what the people are saying. So I think it requires a freedom. Um, and that means to have a mind which is very, very attentive, very curious, listening to people, even when we don't agree with them, we listen, make some notes, and when our turn comes, we present our views clearly. So when people are like that, they are listening, they are free, they are willing to understand their own self, then dialogue happens, just like dialogue between Krishnaji and David Bohm, and they talked a lot about what it means to have a dialogue. So that requires ability to listen clearly without interfering. And of course, there are diversities in everywhere in India. And I see many dialogues happening on television, but I don't feel that they have real dialogue. They are shouting and we don't understand anything because they don't have the freedom in the first place. So to have a dialogue, freedom to speak, freedom to listen is very much necessary. Okay, I have said enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Harshad Bhai. I think Vikas ji, in the present times where we have so much division, such a strong views on issues facing us. I think it's a real challenge to have a dialogue, but I think you have rightly said, Krishna talks about a dialogue between friends where words may not be necessary, you know. It has something to do with the heart rather than the mind. So uh, one has to come to that stage where there is more of listening than talking about it. That is something that has to be kept in mind. As Harshad Bhai also pointed out, you also mentioned in your discourse. Uh, we have Dinesh Waghmare. Yes, sir. Unmute yourself.
Are you able to listen to me, sir?
Yes.
Vikas, sir, I would like to ask you, suppose you don't know Krishnamurti, you don't know Fere. All those wordings are dead things. In today's environment, people or new boys are talking only of economy-based ideology. There is no other ideology existing. It seems so. Maybe there. It seems so. So how you will tackle the situation or how you will look at it? Because it's a live thing. It's not a dead thing. All the past things are dead now.
Absolutely. And this is a question that that I often face, that, you know, we live in a society and all these social institutions influence us. So they are there. We may say that they are not important, but they are there. It's a facticity. So there are a couple of things that I think I have realized, and yesterday I found them very beautifully articulated by Krishnamurti ji himself. One is the difference between a dialogue and a dialectic. You know, this idea that there is a thesis and there will be an antithesis and they will merge to become a synthesis. And then the synthesis will be a new thesis. It's all a process of reason. And it is all a process in which we are refining that reason. Now, contrary to this, the idea that we have is to witness and to see social institutions as a product of human relationships. So in one situation, the human relationships are of use, abuse, with the intention to control, manipulate. And a society that probably we all would want to be in, a society in which the relationships are of love and compassion. And probably this importance of human relationships is what is at the core of any change. So that I have come to realize, not just from Krishnamurti, but also from other thinkers and from my own experiences. So there can be an economics. We have to imagine an economics which is rooted in love and compassion. So that is why I highlight to my students that we have to look at economic indicators other than GDP. Maybe quality of life, maybe happiness index, maybe human development index, or maybe some other new kind of index. So even though we engage in these social actions, we cannot lose ground in that in that choiceless awareness, where we see ourselves as we are in full nudity, and we see our relationships as they are in their reality. And of course, the dialogues that we see on TV are actually not dialogues, they are duologues. They are just two people talking to each other. So, I mean, we need to talk about when something appears like a dialogue, what is a monologue, or when something appears as a dialogue, but it is a debate, and when something appears as a dialogue, but is only a dialectical tussle, and when it actually is a dialogue.
Thank you,
That's my...
Dr. Baniwal. Thank you. Mr. Chaitanya Nagar wants to say something. Yes, Chaitanya, please go ahead. Chaitanya. I think he has.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
We can hear you, but not can't see you. Yes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, but when you can hear me, I am not able to hear you. Wait.
Unmute again. Unmute yourself.
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Ah, something wrong.
Go ahead and speak, Chaitanya. We can hear you very well.
Okay. What I wanted to say is thanks, Professor, for talking about this social transformation and the difficulties that society has faced in bringing about a transformation in the outer structure, and you also touched upon the difficulties that one has faced in bringing about the inner change. I think a couple of years back, I was listening to a very senior professor from this Council of Philosophical Research, Professor Ved Parayan. And he said something that interested me a lot. He said that the original root meaning of the word academic is casual. Now, it interested me a lot, and I later had a conversation with him about this. I didn't myself conduct a research into this word, and I was really surprised to hear this from a man who was a very senior academician. What he meant by casual was perhaps that in academics, people don't have a habit of looking at things and events and people, theories very deeply. That's what he said, he meant. One thing that I just wanted to talk about was the negation of, or the rejection of comparison that Krishnaji often talked about when he said, don't compare. And I think that was not just an academic technical insistence that you find in the teachings. I think he wants, when I listen to you, for instance, Professor, I just see that when I listen to you and somebody else's words even enter my mind, that moment is a moment of non-listening. When I compare, the moment I compare what you say with what somebody else has said, I'm actually not listening. So comparison prevents listening. If I'm not able to listen to what you're saying, then perhaps I don't understand you, what you're saying. And now comparison is very common in the academia. People compare what one philosopher, one thinker said to what somebody in the past or have said, or they're saying now. Having said that, I really appreciate what you said, but I have a question. Like if you look at the Krishnaji's insistence that the inner must be addressed first, one has to look at oneself, one has to observe and do it without judging oneself, without liking what one sees, without disliking what one sees, and that observation without wanting to change what one is leads to transformation. Okay, and then there are people, and communists have conducted an experiment, lasted for 70 years, the whole thing disintegrated. in the twinkling of an eye. And now, I mean, that's what happens. Both Gandhi says that be the change that you want to see in the world. Now, both make sense to me. The politician relinquishes the inner change idea because he thinks he's interested in quick results. He wants to turn something into a popular movement, and he hopes that it will bring about a radical change in the way our relationships with natural resources, with things and people are now. That's the hope that guides him, that inspires him. But experience has shown, statistics have shown that this has failed. But don't you think, sir, that the idea of what Krishnaji talks about, the inner transformation, he even is quite a rationalist. He even talks about the biological aspect of that transformation, saying that it actually leads to the mutations in the cells of the brain. So there's a biological foundation also about which he talks. Now, but experience, our own perception of things as they are, look at the lives of people like Buddha, Christ, and Krishnaji, some other liberated souls, people who we believe were liberated. Has life become any better? Has society, the world at large, become a better place? Just because one person, and we believe what he says was true, has been able to transform himself or herself radically, fundamentally, completely, like in the sense in which Krishna talks about radical transformation. Has it affected? Were the people who were very close? They say that 63 people became liberated during Buddha's time, but they may be just stories. We don't have any reason to believe what they say is true, because before we say that, we also need to go into the meaning of implication of the word enlightenment. Now, what I say, what I'm trying to hint at, sir, is even this has not worked for human beings. One person has changed radically. He says he has changed. He has gone beyond the human predicament. He has gone beyond the human condition. People believe, people see that what he's saying is true because he's a man of integrity and so on. But has it affected? There's an interesting Zen story that says if you put a spoon in a soup bowl, the spoon may never get the taste of the soup. Now, what brings about the change? I mean, that spoon can stay inside the bowl for maybe hours on end, but is it going to get the taste? So again, we come back to that question that you raised in your talk about transformation, whether through a collective movement, a popular movement, an ideology-based movement, or the kind of movement that Gandhis and Krishnamurtis and the Buddhas have talked about. Because our experience, I mean, Homo sapiens, the wise man, has been living for almost 200,000 years. But I mean, do you see that there has been an evolution? There has been a change for the better. Yeah, that's all. I just wanted to share my observation. And I just want to thank you for the talk that you gave. It's difficult to speak about these issues, especially to mainstream. Krishnaji has always been a challenge for the academia because you can't just convert what he says into a theory. And you write dialogues have been difficult. Groups are not able to sit together and listen to each other. And that has resulted in so much conflict. Individuals, people inside the family. Yeah, I agree with you, sir. So maybe we should all go a little further into this question
Sure.
of transformation. Yeah,
Sure.
that's also done speaking. Thanks.
Very powerful insight that I had when I started reading Krishnamurti was that he always insists on not following him. And this is something that has not happened with any great thinker. Even when Gandhi says that be the change you want to bring, there is an intention to bring a change. And by being in a certain way and by others following you. And I think this insistence on not believing him and what in academia is seen as the struggle in studying and working on Krishnamurti is that he often contradicts himself and he's not very consistent and clear in his articulations. I think that's the beauty of his words, because even they don't let you follow him. Versus, and this whole idea of trying to bring a change versus being a change. So I think this being a change is something that works. I won't claim that I'm too different from my colleagues in academia at any university. But whatever difference and change has happened in me, my students often point it out. So it's not something that I have to tell them, but there are certain learnings, there are certain ways of that change that they are able to experience in certain moments. For everyone, that moment is different. But then, and when they tell me that this is what I have learned from you, I tell them, don't learn from me. So, yes, you liked it. You liked what I do. Think about it, reflect on it. Don't try to be like anyone else. So I think this is also an evolutionary change in the way of being different. Where earlier we wanted the world to follow us, Krishnamurti ji follows, rather he takes the different path, not to follow me.
I think very well said. I just want to add before we have two more people who have raised their hands. Why should we change? That is my question. Why should there be a change at all? It's just like saying that I'll read physics only if you guarantee that I'll become Einstein. I think if I'm interested, I'll just do it. And let's see what happens. Just because Krishnaji brought about changes in people who were with him or not, that is not my concern. But in my daily living, if I can get out of one disorder in my consciousness, there is a possibility that I can perhaps get out of other disorders as well.
Absolutely. And probably this is the humanism of Krishnamurti, this immense faith in the human consciousness to become better.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We'll hear Shakti ji and then Mr. Pradeep Verma. Shakti ji, please unmute yourself.
My voice is...
Yes, very clear.
Yeah. Sir, you mentioned about critical awareness, and it is usually thought that the awareness Krishnamurti talks about is like dumping the thought completely and just to watch. There is no role of any critique there. I just want to quote something from Krishnamurti's notebook. It's a small sentence. says self-critical awareness is essential. Imagination and illusion distort clear observation. This is from the 21st June 1961 entry in Krishnamurti's notebook. Elsewhere also he has talked about being self-critically aware. So it's not the critique of another, it is of one's own experiences, of one's own, whatever. So this is one thing I wanted to say. Another thing is, so far as transformation is concerned, which people call self-realization or enlightenment, whatever name they give to it, the moment we define it, it becomes something which is just in the realm of imagination. We don't know what it is. So the journey with Krishnamurti's message, I feel, is like, you see, he talks about awareness, he talks about unawareness. And in our own daily life, we can see what unawareness does, what happens when there is some awareness. Is it feasible in our own daily life to see if this inattention is something which is innate, or can it be washed? So such questions, and according to one's own capacity, one can go ahead with them, see what happens. So this free inquiry is much more essential than to have an image of some great transformation and they say that person was changed, that other person. The change becomes a very heavy word in that way. This is what I feel. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, I totally agree with you. Saying that we want to change means there is a past and there is a future. And Krishnamurti ji differentiates this movement of mind, thought, and reason as against awareness. So this awareness is not a rational analysis. It is critical because probably it has that, it is trying to find the root, the reflection of that love and compassion in those actions. And yes, of course, naming it destroys it. The moment we name, it becomes an object to be followed, to be achieved, to be controlled. Because the moment you say that this is what we want, then the next question is, how can we achieve it? People in education recently, there is a whole discourse of holistic assessment and holistic education. So in that spirit, in Krishnamurti's spirit, if we say that, what is holistic? And once you define holistic, then the next question is, how do we achieve it? So this is a very interesting paradox, that when you talk of the whole, it is indefinable. And the moment we define it, it has actually come to some of its parts. So yes, I agree with you there.
Thank you, Dr. Baniwal. We'll have Pradeep Verma, Mr. Pradeep Verma. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Is it audible, sir?
Yes.
Okay. After this agreement, I could see while listening to you, Vikas, because I believe seeing is also listening. Seeing is also listening. Your persistent smile tells about your open windows, the readiness to receive fresh moments. Now, I'll share some of what came to me after when I went through this topic, diversity and dialogue in present times. My observation is that diversity and dialogue both are in me, even time. Harshad ji was talking about it. He touched a little bit about it, that it relates to me more than anybody else. My limitedness is familiar with the two words and their meanings. For me, diversity initiates dialogue within and without. Is diversity splitting of consciousness? Question originates in me. Question something that is not clear to me. Then you talked about identity and ideology, self and others. Self and others means diversity. You talked about negation of old foundations as proposed or as by Krishnamurti. This may be because foundations may give fixity which affects the pliability and plasticity of existence or life. So these are some of my observations, and we are talking about transformation. Transformation starts with me, ends with me. So this is what I feel, unless until which is glorified as self-knowing, self-realization, and a number of other things. But it starts with me, always. That is what I feel. Thank you very much for giving me time.
Yes, I totally agree with you, sir, that diversity initiates dialogue. And this diversity could be within oneself, could be with others, of perspectives, or being that having the choiceless awareness. So, see, the other, I mean, this whole notion of love and compassion itself requires the one loving and the one being loved, or compassion towards something, towards yourself. So, I mean, yes, diversity is there, whether it's in the form, whether it's in the form of ideas, whether it is in perspectives, genders. And most ideologies negate the diversity. They want everyone to become the same, either become the same class, or become of the same religion, become of the same faith, become of the same perspective, which is what I was also critiquing through Krishnamurti's ideas.
Thank you, Dr. Baniwal. We have 3-4 people who have raised hands. Dr. Harshad Parekh, and Dinesh Waghmare and Pradeep Verma again. You want to take these 4 questions, or you would like to continue with your discourse?
No, sir. I think the questions are important.
Okay. Harshad Bhai.
Sir, Chaitanya Nagar is also raising hands.
Yes, yes. We'll take it in the same order. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Our problems of psychological nature, like fear, anger, jealousy, Krishnaji said that it is because of the duality between the thinker and thought. What he said, that from thinking arises the sense of I or me, and then we want to change thought. So there is a duality, and to observe that, one needs very acute sense of observation inward. Because generally in our schools and colleges, we become very curious about the outside world, to look at society, politics, religion, and we are looking outward. But Krishnaji's teachings are taking us right to the root from where all our problems arise. And to observe this beginning of a problem, that means to observe the beginning of a thought. And when a person is really intensely interested in looking inward, such a person will find that there is nothing coming, no, even thinking stops. And at that time, either there is a fear of a psychological death, that there is no sense of I, or there is a sense of wondering that, oh, it's so wonderful to be without thinking and just looking. So that is why people who are naturally curious to look inward to see the beginning of a problem in relationship, whether it's a fear, anger, jealousy, then one has to look inward. And again, Krishnaji says, freedom is at the beginning. That means, how do you look at the beginning? So maybe in this process, it may happen that the mind stops, and in that one can begin to observe whatever the thoughts are arising. It's like being in an empty room and the door is open and somebody is entering through the door and you see that somebody has come. So similar happens the state of mind. If a thought is entering, one sees that yes, thought is coming, and not doing anything about it and just allow it to wander around the room is what Krishnaji calls choiceless awareness. So in the background of awareness, thoughts come and go. They don't create problems. Only when there is this thinker which wants to change thought, that I like it, I don't like it, then there are all these problems happens. So this is what I found extraordinary in Krishnamurti's teachings, is about observing the beginning of a thought and then coming to a sense of freedom to look. And when this happens really in one's life, then even the quality of brain and the body changes, what Krishnaji calls mutation of the brain cells. And then everything looks very fresh. Even when you look at a tree or a human being, you don't look from the previous knowledge about that person. So this is a great teachings of Krishnamurti, but one has to really be alone, curious, honest, looking inward curiously, like children who are very curious to look at everything. So that kind of simplicity is necessary, I feel. And then once a person changes, then there is a possibility of change in society, probably. In the way we relate with people will change. Our relationship with people changes when we really change. And then we don't get very angry or upset when somebody says something unpleasant. We listen and then we speak properly, like that. So that is what. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Harshad. Yes, Chaitanya.
I must acknowledge that this is one idea that I struggle a lot. This feeling of non-duality, this experience of non-duality, I think we can never talk about it. And the thing, something which comes closest to it is this idea of choiceless awareness. So I'm digressing and differentiating here a little. Because when we say that there is an observer and there is an observed, it's still a duality. Even when I let the thought wander, it's still duality. So I think this is the last point that we can talk about. And probably in this moment, suddenly you have a moment of non-duality where you transform, where you get transformed without a choice. So I think this choiceless awareness, being aware without judgment, this is the last thing that we can do with some intention. but I am struggling with this idea and this notion of where does non-duality end? Where does duality end and non-duality happens?
Thank you, Dr. Baniwal. Chaitanya, please go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, you see, Shakti ji asked a very, very important question. And I noticed that the two questions, two observations and that followed, they seemed very disconnected from what Shakti ji said. And I think that's an important thing that perhaps must be borne in mind, that what we say has to have some connection with what the previous speaker or the questioner has said. Because I had a lot of difficulty staying with what Krishnaji said, because what two other people said, Harshad and Vermaji, it seemed that they were not related to the question that Shakti raised. I would like to just go back to what Shakti said. Shakti ji said that he mentioned the expression, the idiom critical awareness.
Self-awareness.
Right, sir? So I think that's very important, because Shakti ji, I just want to ask you if you don't see a contradiction between choiceless and critical. Because when this question may be stemming from my inability to understand the word critical completely, because when I listen to the word critical, generally the meaning that it conveys is that I am judging, I am comparing whether this is the right kind of awareness. And when I look at the word choiceless or passive or non-judgmental, it conveys a completely different quality. So I think that's my question for the professor who spoke, and Shakti ji as well, if you could kindly respond to this, because when I say choiceless, it has a completely different meaning, at least to me. And for me, critical means all kinds of evaluations, assessments, judgments, comparisons, and so on. Correct me, yeah, please, if I'm wrong.
So my response came from the idea that there is some essence of the being. It's love, compassion, and when we have the choiceless awareness, then anything which will essentially in its essence contradict that essence will be critically, I mean, so it's not a rational criticality, but it's knowing that the essence of this is different, or the essence of this action, this incident, this perspective is not love. So it's more than being critical, it is knowing the essence of something else. So that was my stand. I mean, that was my understanding from which I was saying.
Shakti ji.
Yes, sir. This about Chaitanya's observation about choiceless awareness. You see, for me, the usage of the word self-critical awareness by Krishnamurti is the emphasis is on the self. And somewhere else he talks about doubting. And then he says that if the inquiry doesn't follow doubt, then the doubt doesn't lead anywhere. So now what happens when the awareness is choiceless? Is thought excluded from that? Is the critical attitude excluded from that? This is one thing I ask from myself. Of course, when there is this choiceless awareness in whatever degree, mostly thought becomes an obstacle in watching. But if I am not self-critical, then I can be either, in some sort of imagination or some sort of projection, which I am not aware of. I'm just, doing that. So this is one thing. I just want to add one thing here. My experimentation with Krishnamurti's awareness has been very erratic. It's not the mainstream of my life. Whatever I have said is based on my intellectual understanding, and it's not very existential. At the same time, I would say that it helps me to understand the trajectory of whatever experimentation one can go through. One more thing I would like to say, sir, you have said about the duality of thinker and thought. I tried to understand it in analytical way, which Krishnamurti will not agree with that, but it gave me some light. You see, it's like we are very sure, the dreamer and the dreamed. All whatever is being dreamt of is part of the dreamer. And in the waking state, in the so-called waking state, whatever I am thinking or feeling is also part of my inner world. In fact, the thoughts and dreams are not very different. So in that way, I think that the entity which I have imagined, there is a separate thinker, separate observer. Is it really separate, or is it all part of it? You see? So at least it does one thing, that you start doubting the belief in duality. It gets some cracks somewhere. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Satiji. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Dinesh Waghmare.
Vikasji, I would like to ask you a question. If we see today's youth, we find that, at least I find that there is some indifference about the society, towards the society. They are very much sentimental about the propaganda, and there seems to be a self-centeredness. So it seems that only the violence can make some change, or here and there, and can make some change to them. Even world level also, we are finding the same thing, that violence is making some difference, I would say. So how you will do the dialogue with them to show the importance of love and affection, or what is the solution?
So I teach students who are going to be future teachers. So my engagement with them is quite interesting. What I have realized in those engagements is, one, people are the way they are because they haven't experienced anything else. So it's, I would say it's not in their imagination that it's something different is possible. So that's one. Now the question which can be asked from the other side is that students, they are self-centered, probably because they have not seen any other way to be while growing up. Now, are we saying that? So I would say yes, that's what I'm saying. Second, it's also an aesthetic, like an aesthetic experience. If you haven't tasted something, you don't know how it feels, how it tastes. If you haven't seen something, you don't know how that experience will change you. So that is also another thing that I have experienced in my classes. Once students are able to taste that moment of dialogue, that moment of, no matter how fleeting it is, of being a witness and looking at themselves in their reality. And I'm saying that it is very fleeting moment. I'm not saying it stays. But even an experience of that fleeting moment changes them. So, and probably this is where Krishnamurti ji highlighted a lot of, gave a lot of importance to relationships. So I think the young students, the young people that you have in mind, I would say probably they have never had an experience of a genuine relationship. So probably if they would have had even a single experience, their imagination and their way of being would change.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Baniwal. Yes, Pradeep Verma ji, please.
Yes, sir. I have two simple questions. One to Vikas ji, when he talked about lover and loved, while talking of love and compassion, lover and loved, I think that talks about the duality. Okay. I think what Krishnamurti was probably what he shared and whatever he wanted to share with others is the unconditional love. The person who loves, the love itself is such a treasure that what you get out of it doesn't matter much to me. So this is what I feel, the compassion, this is something which satisfies you. Once you are a lover, then that itself is enough. That makes you whole to me. And another question to Shakti ji, he was talking about criticality and comparison. This is what we have seen in the last 10 minutes. You see, when you are expecting something out of certain dialogue, then itself shows that this is a conditional access, conditional listening. You are expecting some answer from someone. And if it doesn't happen, we criticize it, we compare it, and we deny, ideologically we deny it. But what we do is very different. Thank you very much.
This is exactly what I was saying that I struggle with, because intentionally we can. It's easy to have a lover and loved relationship. To some extent, in some moments it's possible to have love for all. But I think this idea that you are love, it's very ephemeral. And yes, so and this, I think this is the only point when you are love, you are compassion, that the duality has gone. But before you are that, there is duality. So yes, I agree with you. But I accept that I do struggle with that. It's like dialogue. You are open. If you say I'm open, there is duality. If you say I'm listening, there is duality. If you say I'm in a dialogue, there is a duality. When you become dialogue, you can't say it. वो कबीर वाला आई थिंक वो बेटर है कि जब मैं था तब हरि नहीं, अब हरि है मैं नहीं. So I think that cannot be spoken of. So it's the last point that where we can point. Okay, go there, probably you will tip over the edge.
Thank you. Very well said. Shakti, you want to answer a part of Pradeep Verma's question? Yes. And then Harshad bhai.
Yeah. Pradeep Verma ji and Harshad ji, you see, I'm sorry, I don't agree with Chaitanya ji that you should have followed my string of thought. This is not that sort of forum. That is first thing. Another thing is, this about critique and comparison. You see, one sort of comparison can be, I am listening to Krishnamurti or reading his book, and another something else comes to my mind, so that will block the reading. One thing is that I have read Krishnamurti's this passage, and then I'm thinking on these things, and then I suddenly realize that when Krishnamurti says that, when desire is interfered with thought, when sensation is interfered with thought, it becomes desire. And I suddenly remember, yes, in Gita also, there is a shloka which talks about it. Somebody else has also said it. So in that way, it comes in the thinking process afterwards, which is we call manan in tradition, which Krishnamurti says thinking on these things. So that is the only thing, because there is a big difference, Pradeep Verma ji, that sometimes, I feel like those who are primarily experimenting with these things, they will have a very different, way of looking at things, but someone like me who is just studying and experimenting very little, so just consider it as another point of view, just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Harshad bhai.
Yes, I like to say something about thinking and awareness by giving a metaphor that there is a big room and the room is dark and there are many people, they are walking and they are colliding with each other because there is a darkness. And then a light is turned on in the room, and now these people, they don't collide with each other because there is a light. So what I consider awareness is that light, and the people walking are like thoughts. So when there is the awareness, thoughts, they don't create any problem at all. It's only when there is no awareness, thought multiplies and creates duality. I like it, I don't like it. All that conflict starts when there is no awareness. But in awareness, even thoughts, they come and go, they don't create any problem. And that's why Krishnaji says, in the light of awareness, all problems created by thinking are dissolved. So I feel that yes, our main problem is not having awareness, which can look at thoughts without any interference, without doing anything. So thoughts come and go, they don't create any problem. Only when this thinker, which comes out from thinking and says, I like it, I don't like it, then there is a problem, duality comes. Otherwise, thoughts move, they come and go. Only there is a seeing clearly of all these thoughts. There is no problem. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Harshad bhai. Yes, Mr. Pradeep Verma, and then...
Yes, just a small, again, listening to Shakti ji, when he talks about reading Krishnamurti or listening to him, then I start thinking about it. So I don't want to say more about thinking. Thinking is thinking. So this thinking, enough has been said what thinking and thought and thinker, all these things are there, what all comes with it. So that comes with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Sushil ji, you want to say something? Unmute yourself, unmute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I wanted to say choice and self, both are illusion. On illusion, you can talk as much you like, but neither choice exists nor self exists. Both are illusion. If you reflect on it, then we will find it. So self-critical is necessary because self is not there. So you can criticize that. You can compare that. I can compare with myself. But there is nothing like self, nothing like choice. What I feel.
I don't know, Sushil ji, because I don't see self as illusion.
Illusion never sees illusion itself. Illusion is something else. You feel that it is illusion, but it is not illusion.
Yes. I think we'll take the last question from Mr. Shankar Rao. Yes, okay. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. See, I go with Mr. Sushil Jain. Krishnamurti actually stopped at some point. He should have gone a little beyond that. Like, he denied only certain thoughts, like psychological thoughts only he denied, as he said they are illusionary thoughts. But he's wrong, I should say. I bluntly say that because every thought is false, even mechanical thought. If I see my son, if I say he's sitting, he's standing, he's fallen down, that is also false. That we have to see that. It is all naming. The thought is naming all this sitting, standing, and all. He should have told that. As Mr. Jain said, everything is false. Even self, everything is false. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar Rao. Thank you. I think we have come to the end of the session now, and I want to thank Dr. Vikas Baniwal for such an interesting session, which brought so many critical questions, and I think a large number of people participated. So thank you all. Thank you so much. Next Sunday, our session will be at 6:30 p.m. We have Dr. Gopal Krishnamurti. He is a professor in university in US in the East Coast. And to some of us who know him, he has been a student of a Krishnamurti school, and then he was a teacher in Brockwood, principal there, and also in Ohio, and then went to US, and he is a professor there of education. So he'll be talking on exploration of teaching and learning in the mirror of Krishnamurti's teachings. So please join us next week, Sunday at 6:30 p.m. If you're free, you're all welcome to join. Thank you.
Thank you, Dubey.
Thank you. Once again, thanks to Dr. Baniwal. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks also.
Thanks to everybody who participated. Please close it. Please close it.